Hey everybody. So basically what I'm going to do today is talk about breaking into cybersecurity in 2026, talking about what employers actually want, why this entry level pipeline is breaking, and what people in these really honestly crappy situations can do to better their chances. So let's get into it. All right. So the contradiction within itself is basically that you have all of these employers screaming at the top of their lungs that they have nobody qualified to hire. And then you have all of these beginner to mid level people who are saying, well, I'm not seeing that because everybody's rejecting my application. Now, the reason all of this happens is for several different things, but I'm going to describe the economic aspect of this first. So basically, I'm going to say what it is. We're in a recession. Nobody wants to call it that, but that's what we're in. We're in a recession. Businesses are getting smaller because they have less budget to work with. And because of that, when you have less budget to work with, when you're doing hiring, you're now having to have one person fulfill multiple roles and this weird expectation that somehow they're going to do that for less money. And it's just unrealistic. And it creates this thing where now you have something that's marked as an level role that isn't actually entry level, and mid level people are competing with people who just started out, which they're doing this purposely because then it creates this desperate need to take something for lower pay. And that is what's creating this contradiction that we're seeing in the market. And this is backed by a lot of data. But the data that they like bringing up is often not the data that you think it is. So let's kind of talk about that. Now, as you can see here, there's a lot of different things that are positively, reflecting the current state of cybersecurity when it's just not actually that. You see that biggest number that's up there, 514K. They try to use this number to say to you, there's just so many jobs available. You should come over here, get your certifications, go get a degree, do all of this stuff, and I promise that you'll have a job. And it's a lie. It's just a flat out lie because what this number is telling you isn't actually what it means. So 514K, this represents the total ask, which means senior positions, mid-level positions, entry positions, all of this is falling under one umbrella. But it's not actually telling you the real breakdown. But if you go through this information that's a little bit below it, you'll start to see where that breakdown happens, which means basically what's going on based on the numbers is that we're having this huge bubble form, this lack of experience for higher level stuff. And what they're trying to do is take 10, or not even that, let's just be honest, two entry level people, throw some AI tools on top of that, along with a bunch of other useless garbage, and then cram them into that hole thinking that that's going to work. And it's just not, because it's not how any healthy system throughout all of time when it's come to technology has ever been able to subsist. So when you see numbers like this, or somebody tries to present those numbers, you can tell them they don't know anything because you are giving me numbers that skew in my favor without actually telling me that the real reason you're telling me this information is so that you can have this big pool of people and cast a net and get exactly what you want while leaving everybody else SOL. And that's just, bad business in my opinion. Now, the reason this becomes an entry level experience loop is because what people do when they get rejected is they immediately start blaming their skills as the problem. When in reality, it's not the skills that's the problem, it's the years of experience. And people think that if they collect enough skills or enough certifications or degrees or whatever, they'll be able to make up for the lack of, you know, hands-on dirty experience that the employers are asking for. And I'm here to tell you that that's just not possible. There's a lot of different things that you can do to amplify this and try to get around the problem, but just adding more and more crap isn't going to get you anywhere. It's just going to burn you out, make you frustrated, and it's definitely going to hurt your chances because then you have all of these other people who are going to start doing the same thing. So then it becomes this overwhelmingly competitive market that never needed to be that competitive in the first place. Now, this comes down to the reason this is all happening, right? This is happening because of who's controlling cybersecurity. And that is quite frankly business people. People who do not understand what we do for them. And They try to limit everything based on money, budgeting, and headcount because that is their purview. When you start delegating all of these responsibilities to different kinds of people, they start thinking that just because I did my job, everything should be fine. When in reality, that's hardly ever the case. Because if you think about it, no one single person is going to be able to fill five hats regardless of you meeting your budget. And that is why your people are running into this problem. So if they're running into this problem, well, how can you really decide what an entry level position looks like because they're putting entry level stuff on things that aren't entry level? Well, let me show you how. This stuff right here. Now, NIST, NICE, and a couple of organizations put a lot of good information together, but personally, I like ISC2 because they show you what the trends are currently, and then you can kind of compare them to what the functionality of those things should look like when it comes to NIST and other things. Now, you can see here the real entry level duties versus what comes with experience. Basically, if you are a newer employee, you can review an alert, document what you find, and pass the decision on to someone else with more authority. That is the real contribution with this, and that is what a lot of it is being replaced on AI. But the organization can't afford this anymore, as we can see, because now AI is starting to roll back, but we're actually not putting applications out there to fill the positions that AI was supposed to take and now isn't actually good enough to do. So when we have that problem, that leads to experienced workers being pushed more towards this judgment place where basically a lot of what their value comes from is being able to react to an unfamiliar situation. And it creates this whole false dichotomy. But nonetheless, look at this information here. This should be able to give you a good idea of what you're looking for in those descriptors when it comes to the job applications. Because if you're seeing some more stuff that's going to be on this site here, then that's not an entry level role. That might be titled an entry level role, but that is not an entry level role. Entry level roles should look like this. If it doesn't look like this, then you are getting a mid level role at an entry price. And even if you did qualify for it, you don't want to work for that person. I'm going to tell you so straight. You don't want to work for that person. It's going to suck. So, all of this to say, how can we as people, you know, increase our odds and kind of determine what makes employers choose one person over another? Well, that's going to come right here. This is the stuff that candidates can actually control. So you can target your roles, you can build your evidence, you can get your related experience, and you can do all of those things. What you can't control is the hiring freezes and all the stuff that's going on in the market. Do what you can with what you got. That's the thing. And nobody tells you that because everybody wants to, give you this frou-frou ideology of if you do all the right things, everything will be fine and just follow this particular path when let's be honest, not everybody's path looks the same. Not everybody comes into the industry in the same entry. As you saw in those previous slides where we were talking about, only 8% of people come in straight from college. 26% and all the rest of the other percentages come from different places. So, when you're not taking that stuff into consideration, you're actually limiting yourself. So, think about the stuff that you can actually control. The list is kind of up here, but keep that stuff in mind when you're going through trying to break it. Now, target work, not job titles. This is some really important information. Now, the titles here kind of give you like a good idea for things to search, but once you search the titles and you start looking at the job, do not focus on the title of that job. Look at the requirements, look at what they're asking for. Go back to that previous slide and compare, is this actually an entry level job or is this somebody with a broke budget? Because that's really what's going on. People are too broke to hire, and so they're hiring people who are willing to lowball because they think that that's the answer to their problems. When honestly, if you think about it, if somebody's willing to take that much money, then are they really that good at what they do? You know? Nonetheless. Now, for all of this movement and things to start happening, people really need to understand the value of what they already do and how they can actually translate that to resumes and things like that. So, what I'm going to say here is consider the difference between these two things. Now, when people list stuff on their resume, they generally do like these 1 to 2 word things, but I highly encourage that quality is better than quantity. If you reduce the number of workforce things that you add, like the number of jobs that you put on your resume, but actually add more detail to the job description, you'll actually find more success because the more you write on the description, the more odds that that ATS software is going to catch your resume and actually pull you as part of the pool. So that's why I'm saying here you can kind of see where the simple is translated into what the responsibility is. Because if you can prove and translate what you already do, then the odds of them being able to trust you with other stuff goes up, which means you get hired. Now, building evidence is one of those things that's kind of tricky because you know how I said before, certifications and projects don't mean shit in the grand scheme of things. They are something that you do in order to build your skill, not necessarily to inherently prove that you're worth something. However, there are some instances where you can do things that will be projects that can show employers that you are trustworthy, reliable, whatever. What I normally do for me is I like to research the companies that I want to work for. And I look at the news outlets, searching at what the problems they are starting to see in the public when regarding these things. And then I think about, how can I solve that problem? And then I go online and I do research and I try to find all the information I can and I become an expert in that problem. Once you become an expert in that problem, you then find a solution. And once you do the solution, you can document how you did those things. And if they can understand and see your reasoning, boom, increases your chances of getting hired almost immediately because now not only do you have the technical knowledge and you can prove that you can do it, but you can also prove that you can communicate those things not to just people who are technical, but also to people who are non technical, which is a big part of what we do despite what people think. Now, running a measured job search, what does that mean? So basically, what this means is that applying and getting a job is a hassle. It is a lot of it is about sifting through the BS and trying to figure out who is actually looking for a viable person and not. What I normally do is I just follow the things that are up here, which is, if I had to summarize it, if you notice, and then you're reading the job description, and that garbage looks AI generated, or it looks like they are trying to cram 40 different things underneath one, you don't want to work there. You don't want to work there even if you could work there because honestly, that shows the quality of the company that you're working for. And for a lot of people who are newer in the industry, you're going to be very tempted to take those roles. However, when something goes wrong, which it always does, who do you think bears the yoke of that burden? You. And then most people end up getting fired or worse. And then you end up blacklisted from the industry and nobody wants that. So, all of this to say, when you're running a search for a job, do a lot of background checks on who you're working for. Look at Glassdoor, look at all of the different things. Because if you can spearfish versus fishing with a net, it makes the odds of you getting something even higher. And that to me is where you start having networking and all of that stuff come into it. Because in my experience, networking is how I've gotten the majority of the jobs that I've gotten in the past. Knowing somebody and being able to work that connection and actually speak to somebody in person, that just increases your odds. Trying to, mass apply and like message a bunch of people and be weird, that's just not going to get you to where you want to be. If anything, it's going to make people think that you're this fake person. And then when you send your application to a job, they're just going to reject it because their system is going to tell them, hey, this is a fake person. All of that to say, we're moving on, but that is my piece when it comes to this slide. So, structured pathways. What does this mean? So, structured pathways are something that I think every single person in a graduate, undergrad, whatever program that you're kind of in where you're learning can actually take advantage of. Paid internships, apprenticeships, rotational programs, all of this stuff you can look up online to find these things. But what I normally suggest doing, especially if you're in college, is going to your career office. They're all called different things, but we call ours the career office. And just go in there and ask them and tell them to be realistic with you. What can you find for me? What can I find for myself? How can I do this stuff? And a lot of the time they'll work with you. If you have a crappy career, program, people go online. There's a lot of different cybersecurity groups, meetups, things like that, that actually provide a little bit of mentorship with it. So if you go there and you talk to people and you're like, hey, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to do, do you know of any opportunities, apprenticeships, whatever, side gigs that might fit this description? And 9 times out of 10, somebody will have something for you. It might not necessarily be exactly what you want, but it'll be something that can get you in the direction of where you want to move. Now, this is really an important part, and I think I've kind of basically beat this like a dead horse, more or less. Please evaluate your employer. That interview that you walk into is just as much for them as it is for you. So when you ask questions, make sure you're asking questions that are about the process. What happens in the first 90 days? How long until you work alone? Things like that. Because if they can't answer those questions with a precision or they're answering but it's vague, that's not somebody you want to work for, because honestly that's somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, and if they don't know what they're doing, how are you supposed to know what you're doing? And that just leads to a bunch of miscommunication and eventually getting fired, which that looks bad on you, and now you have to go look for another job. All of this to say, please focus on these questions. Try to pick out the ones that you can understand, the ones that are going to get the answers that you need in order to feel like you are making a good judgment about who this person you're going to work for is. Because if you don't ask these questions early on, you are going to get in that position. And I'm telling you, the first 30 to 90 days are like heaven. You're like, oh, you know me. And then that 90-day hits, and then all of a sudden it's all in your face, screaming about something that you didn't even know that you were responsible for, yelling at you about all sorts of different things that you were not previously required to handle at all. All of this to say, just ask the questions, do what you're supposed to do. Now we're moving on to the end. So basically, this is a very short presentation. I did it pretty much entirely off script because I've just been tired and exhausted and frustrated with a lot of different things in my own personal life. And quite frankly, I want to be more honest about what this stuff is doing. And I feel like people aren't. They are not going in the direction that people should be going in. And overall, management is the problem. Management. So if you're struggling out there and you don't know how to write a resume, you don't know how to do a portfolio, you don't know how to do something that you feel like you should be able to do, put it in the comments. I will make a video about it. I will do everything that I can possibly do to help you, because I feel genuinely in my heart of hearts that we are not doing that enough for each other, because we see every single person we come across as competition. You're not my competition, just like I'm not your competition. Do you know who our competition is? The kid sitting in a dirt floor learning all sorts of stuff on a cracked iPad. That's the person we're competing with. The person who wants, needs, and understands it more than we do. And quite frankly, to be able to get to that level, you have to have support. You have to have support. And people are not supporting enough of each other, and people are not supporting enough in the workplace. And that is why we are having, in my opinion, a total productional breakdown of society. This is not the only industry this is happening in. This is like a universal thing. And the more people point it out and see it and learn how to deal with it, the easier life will be. So, again, I will repeat my lesson just as a short description. Resume, get that under control. Portfolio, get that under control. Networking, do it. It's required. And most importantly, follow and like my videos. Just kidding. It's not a requirement, but you should. Nonetheless, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and hopefully my next video will be more on script and I will not just be, I don't know, in my feelings, I guess. But I hope you guys have a great week, and I hope this video was informative to you. If you like the presentation, feel free to go into the comments or description below, copy and paste, all of that jazz. If you want the more extended version of this presentation, I have like a 28 slide version. Um, Ask for it in the comments. Maybe I'll post another link to it. I highly doubt it though, just because I felt like I cut it down to 14 slides before, just because I felt like I was giving more than what you really needed. And it felt more like a rant than it was helpful information. And I want this stuff to be helpful. So if this wasn't helpful, or you want more information about something, or you want my thoughts, feelings, whatever, just let me know. I hope you guys have a great time, and see you guys in the next one.